So thank you very much for joining us today for our first kind of official Trends and Insights session on digital twins. We kind of wanted to introduce you all to that new kind of model where we will also have external speakers and a little bit more in-depth information. What we're going to talk about today is, first of all, we're going into a quick definition, then the history of digital twins, where it comes from, where it's kind of heading, and some of those applications in healthcare. Of course, it has a lot of applications in healthcare, so we're touching base on too many of those. Then we have our first guest speaker, Emil. He's going to give us an introduction to a very interesting approach to mental health. And then ultimately, we have Dr. Simon Sonntag with us, who will give us kind of an insight on how the regulatory environment looks like, how it is changing, in particular around clinical trials, medical device certification, etc., as he's very involved in that. But first things first, let's kick it off with a definition by IBM. So digital twins in general are virtual representations of physical objects or systems across their life cycles. They generally use real-time data and other sources to enable learning, reasoning, and dynamically recalibrating for improved decision-making. So ultimately what that means is we take any sort of device, any sort of object, or maybe a system, potentially a human, and transfer that into a digital representation. And then we do a bunch of things to that digital representation to get a better understanding of how it would react to that without actually doing it to the device. It considers all sorts of different interactions. It considers, for instance, the element, how that interacts with its environment, how that interacts to external forces, but also how that interacts to other elements. And then also looking at the shape, etc. So every critical factor around any sort of device, any sort of system that influences the day-to-day interaction, and then ultimately also influences the purpose of it. Thinking about the history and when the terminology digital twin was kind of introduced, it was introduced in 2002 at the University of Michigan. It was introduced by one of the professors talking about product lifecycle, where they were thinking about, okay, how can we use a digital representation to better understand the product lifecycle? But actually, it goes back quite a bit. It goes back to 1970, where it was used for the first time in a not so digital setup. It was more a twin, not a digital twin. And that was around the rescue mission of Apollo 13. By the time the capsule had struggles to get into the Earth environment again, and they used the twin, the physical twin they had on site at NASA to do all the calculations, the simulations on the physical object to make sure that the actual mission is returning safely to the Earth. So that was back in 1970. Then 2002, the first kind of technology rise was, and then there was a thinking about, okay, we can have that digital representation. But the real uprise came then in 2017 with an increasing interest in Internet of Things, in connected devices, and actually with that, the rise in generated data and the rise in available data. So with that data, it was way more easy to build those digital representations and do simulation and a better understanding. As we've seen here, we've come from only a physical version of a digital twin to a physical version and a digital version, which is not connected. So ultimately, that would be just a CAD model where you do some simulations, but you don't have the real connection to the device or to whatever you want to simulate. We're currently at the third stage where we have that interaction through sensors that are interacting with the device and then with the digital twin, but it's very much manufactured by the human still. So we're taking and kind of, well, programming those data sources into the digital twin and fostering and forcing that interaction. The next version will be a complete autonomous interaction. So data is always given to the digital twin, to the digital version. That's automatically evaluated, adapted. That feedback goes back to the physical representation, and we can automatically steer things. I quickly only want to go into the digital twin development cycles and what that actually means if you have a digital twin, to how you use that. First step is in the design. So you use like a digital representation to do a bunch of simulation on that device and see how it's interacting and how it could potentially interact to get a better understanding. What's the optimal design for the device? The second portion is build, so the manufacturing portion. So you have your design and now you want to bring it to life. That is separated into two different levels. The first one is manufacturing itself can have an impact on the design and on the quality of the product. So that's the one layer that you can evaluate. The second layer that you can evaluate is the manufacturing process itself. How can you make it more streamlined? How can you make it quicker and more efficient? And then the third like kind of portion in the cycle is the operational portion, where you actually use that device, where you actually use any sorts of system, and it is exposed to the environment. It can be weather, it can be another device it interacts with, etc. And from that, you generate a new layer of insights, which can in turn go into the design portion. That is for devices, that can be for systems. If you think more about drug development, etc., or maybe a patient pathway, for instance, it might be a little bit more of a binary system. So you have a cause, you have an effect, and you're looking at that interaction. But generally, it's always like a circular system that tries to optimize every step of the way. Having been talking about already patient pathways, there are a lot of applications of those solutions for healthcare. I will not go into depth. If you're interested into any of those, feel free to reach out afterwards and we can have a little bit of a more deep dive. But generally speaking, the things that I want to point out here is, for instance, in clinical trial design. And that's also something we're hearing something more about in a second. But generally speaking, the idea here is to generate as much data as possible to really select the right population group in the beginning. So to minimize the population group that you need for any kind of drug development and clinical trials, but also to potentially, even before that, conduct virtual clinical trials. So you have enough data to simulate how a drug, how a medical device, etc., would interact with a human being. And then you already can cancel out and like really streamline the process of clinical trials and make them as small as possible, so thereby lowering substantially the costs of development. Predictive maintenance, quite straightforward. Any source of devices, CT, MRI, etc., laboratory devices. If you have a digital representation, you can even predictively say when they will fail and can send someone to maintain already beforehand, before the incident occurs. As mentioned, if you're interested in any of those topics or more, please reach out. We have a lot of information on that. But I want to hand over the word now to our guest speakers who have been so kind to join us today. And first, I want to showcase, or we want to showcase here, an incredible, interesting startup, the startup called Mindbank. We have Emil, the founder here, and he will give us a quick intro to the company. With that, Emil, I would like to hand it over to you.
Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen here. Should work. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Perfect. Okay. So I always like to talk about how this all started, the why, because it's a very important story, and it's a very important story to me specifically. So about 2 years ago, my daughter was playing with her iPad, and Siri popped up for the first time for her, and she asked me, "Daddy, what is this?" And I said to her, "Honey, this is Siri. She's like a friend. Say hi, Siri, and ask her a question." And my little daughter thought for a second, and she said, "Hi, Siri, do you have a mommy? Siri, do you like ice cream? Show me your toys." And had a conversation, was having a dialogue with Siri for a few minutes. And about 5 minutes later, she's laughing, having a good time. And she says, "Siri, I love you. You're my best friend." And mind you, I was taken aback by that interaction. Because at that moment I said, wow, is my child having like emotional attachment issues with Siri? Like, what's going on in her mind? Like, I was a little bit worried at first, but then I started thinking about, what is her world going to look like when she's my age? And then I said, Siri is just an interface to a database. How can I become that database? How can Daddy become that database so she can always ask me a question, even if I'm not alive? So that's kind of how this journey started for me. But what happened in the process, I realized that I kind of stumbled upon something much greater for humans, for humanity, which is why I say what started as Daddy's quest for immortality led us something far greater for humanity. And in essence, our mission is to provide a secure platform to manage your digital twin and move it from healthcare to self-care. Because really what happens is that as you're interacting with the platform, you're uploading your consciousness, if you want to call it that, building a knowledge graph. The engagement, the reason to come back is self-care, self-understanding. We did at first, we did a headline test, and many headlines, the first one was, "Would you like to live forever?" Great clickbait, low conversion. The best was, "Learn what makes you, you." So we discovered that it's really about understanding, self-care. And we're at a point in time now that we have the ability to take data from your mind through voice, take data from your body through wearables, and interact with this and really build a digital twin. So the current use cases we've seen so far is really interesting. Is our psychologists and coaches are really interested in it because it quantifies their work. It gives them data-driven feedback into the progress of their clients and their patients. And also during the process of meeting a psychologist, meeting a personal coach, you have that session for an hour, but then the other 6 days of the week that you might not have with them, you can have with yourself, and really like train and understand and dive deeper into any issues you might have and really get data feedback on it. Because it's very interesting, the feedback that you get from the psycholinguistic models. But interesting enough, just the process of uploading this data is therapeutic, right? Journaling. The other use case we've seen is mental health just in general, but specifically for PTSD and what they call civilian transition support. And then the last is obviously let's say the aging population, where it's about self-care and elderly, terminally ill patients, and early detection for Alzheimer's potentially as well. So in terms of timing, this is a research done by Gartner in 2020, where they predicted this to be a transformational technology within 5 to 10 years. A year later, they brought that down to 2 to 5 years. And they also predict that it'd be between 1% and 5% of the entire population to have a digital twin. The way we work our business model at the moment, it's a two-sided platform where on the top side, people are paying a subscription fee for premium features, which is premium analysis, really, what we call it. So more questions, more data analysis. And we'll be adding what we call the body bank soon, which is the physiological device connector. So you can have your Apple Watch or Fitbit connected to your Mindbank account as well, and pull in data from your mind and have your data from your body. And what we're doing now is what's called mind-body analysis. And we're actually doing a study right now with Arizona State University on this specific topic. of which the findings I will present in May next month at Miami AI at a conference. I have a speaking engagement there. On the other side, we see there's a lot of opportunity for marketplace. So biometric device subscription, DNA subscription, obviously development courses. But you touched upon something earlier, Fabian, about the clinical trials and things like that. We're also seeing really interesting the monetization of your own data on the marketplace. So being able to say, okay, here's my mind bank, here's my body bank, here you go. And the user, the company, and of course the research institute will all find value in this ecosystem. In terms of the team, it's myself, Andrew, and Emily are the co-founders. Andrew comes from the NSA, so he's our head of systems architecture and cybersecurity. And Emily is our product manager. She's handling all the development teams that we have working at the moment. Of which, if you see, it's quite a big team, even though we're a small company. We're about 15 people, 16 now with myself. Different areas from data science to engineering to marketing as well. All working in different markets. Actually, we have some in the US, New York, Germany, Turkey, North Africa, and Aziz is one of our people. He's in Saudi Arabia. In terms of current traction, we did a pre-sale, and we saw a conversion to paid for people who are actually prepaying, about almost a 1% conversion to paid before we even had a product. And we're integrating with the C-Hub platform, which is a platform from the Qatar Research Institute, and they've tested this physiological platform. It's an integrated health system, and that has over 3,000 patients' data, and we're integrating it so we have a mind bank and a body bank integrated together, and basically analyzing the body and the mind for the physiological analysis. I will share with you one video here, which I think is going to highlight, because some of you might have not even seen the product, but this is a video we created to showcase some of the features.
Hi, I'm your personal digital twin. I learned by asking you many questions. Each answer builds my wisdom. You grow through self-reflection, and I get a little bit closer to becoming you. Let me show you around. Here's our training screen, where you can view your progress based on the number of questions you've answered for this phase of my training. Each phase adds a new dimension to my abilities, and the possibilities are endless. The mind map section is like our consciousness. Different questions will challenge you to reflect and create a more well-rounded version of us. Each swipe revealing more details about our thinking and connecting us to similar personalities. Think of it like collecting cards as a kid, only for your mind.
So there you can see a bit of the product and some of the features. We have a lot more dashboards actually coming out. This video was done about a year and a half ago. So our product features changed slightly. But the interesting thing is that we're adding a lot more deeper insights into personalities and personality insights, and with a Big Five model and a Myers-Briggs model, both of them, so that people can understand what words and topics reveal certain types of personalities within them, or how these personalities are affected by certain topics, which is quite interesting. And in terms of where we are right now, we're raising our safe round with the help of Plug and Play as well. And some of the awards and recognition. So you might see an article on us in Geo magazine in Germany, hopefully next month. I think that's when the article should come out. We were already interviewed, I was already interviewed by all three, Wired, Geo, and Freethink. And like I mentioned, I'll be speaking at Miami AI in next month. So that's it for me, Fabian. Anything else?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Emil, for joining. For any questions, I think we don't have the time for questions right now, but any questions that you might have afterwards, very happy to connect you with Emil, that you can clarify that directly. So thanks, Emil, for being here. I would directly hand it over to Simon, now coming from a product more to a regulatory overview where things are heading. So Simon, great to have you. The stage is all yours.
First of all, thanks a lot for the invitation. Great talking today about a topic I'm engaging in since quite a long time. So always very emotional about talking about this. So it's the regulatory pathway of digital twins. And first, I also want to introduce digital twins a bit. So Fabian already showed this, also what is out there, what applications are there. And I'm always combining digital twin with in silico applications. So in silico meaning everything related to computational modeling. And the first application there is in silico preclinical testing and clinical trials, where you complement traditional benchtop testing and clinical trials by using virtual patients and organ models, as you can see here. Another application is clinical training, so using a virtual environment for training and education of clinicians, and also using this for marketing purposes. So here you can see our virtual reality environment that can be used for this application as well. The third application is then clinical applications. So using then the twins in silico for clinical decision support, for example, patient-specific device selection, operation planning, therapeutics, diagnostics, all these applications there. Then it comes, what you have also heard is then the devices itself. So here you can see an MRI system for Philips for predictive maintenance to then improve uptime, for example, reduce failure risks and so on. So combining here then also in the future more and more the physical device with the digital twin device. And then the last but not least, the whole biopharma area with drug discovery, drug development, then also digital manufacturing and drug delivery on those. At Retronomy, we are focusing on the first three applications, and that's also why today I want to focus on these two applications on the clinical trial, the in silico clinical trial, and also the clinical applications, as all of these different, and these 5 applications have different regulatory pathways. So it's always a bit different how to approach this from the regulatory point of view. So first of all, about us. So we have developed vPatients. This is our patented digital twinning solutions. This enables then the medical device developers to accelerate the whole development process, and also by that reduce the risk to fail, reduce the time and the costs. Here by that, performing data-driven device development and virtual clinical trials using statistical analysis, simulations like fluid simulations, mechanical simulations, and optimization and that. The tool can be then integrated into the whole medical device development process, and by that master the new regulations and ethical demands that are out there that leads to the significant and tremendous increase of cost and time for the developers to get to the market. And all this can be done to save animals and clinical trials by then accessing our digital twin database that is based on clinical data of thousands of humans and animals on that. I'm in this domain already since more of 10 years and also engaging a lot in the policy making. So being part of different societies like the European Society for Artificial Organs, but also the Avicenna Alliance that I will talk about shortly, connecting to the FDA and DEAN on this. I've published a lot of different white papers, also have been a part of an ISO committee introducing the in silico medicine into the artificial heart valve development process and how to use computational modeling in this. And also we are at the moment participating in drafting a so-called good simulation practice, where this can also be introduced and towards and supplement then the good manufacturing practice and also then others like good laboratory practice and that. But first of all, I would like to start here with the in silico preclinical testing and clinical trials. So per se, this is not a medical device, not considered as a medical device. As this software, it does not make any therapeutic and diagnostic decision. It's rather considered a so-called medical device development tool. It's MDDT. So this doesn't need any CE or FDA clearance. It is not necessary. Actually, the FDA, they've introduced a very novel MDDT qualification program. It's voluntarily, so you can apply there and then provide also verification and validation of the in silico tool in that. And once you get then the approval on this, the credibility is increased on that. But it's not mandatory to have it to use this kind of digital evidence for the regulatory submission process. But talking about the FDA, first of all, the US FDA perspective, and they have really identified an important role for modeling and simulation in the strategic priorities. So they have seen also some years ago that it's not just a scientific tool, but really a regulatory tool that has the potential to reduce costs significantly and also test device in a way that is not possible nowadays, and way more effective to bring the devices more safely to the market and also faster and dense. So the current state is there, that simulation is accepted, but it's a smaller part in this. But the FDA is predicting that in the next years, over 40% of the regulatory process will be covered by virtual patients and simulation. This is a big part in this, and especially replaces animal and benchtop testing in the process. Actually, within the FDA, there's a big working group on modeling and simulation. It's around 200 participants, where they have the key objectives to introduce modeling and simulation for the device safety and efficacy on this, also to support implementation of modeling and simulation in regulatory processes, and by that also drafting new guidance documents. And this is very important once it comes to new methods in this domain. When it comes to in silico digital twins, AI, you need new standards, you need new guidelines that has to be drafted about also data storage, data management, that is very necessary in this to then also get there and get then the regulatory process and pathway in this. And here, FDA is working together with ASME on the one hand to draft a so-called verification validation document dedicated to medical devices, but also about reporting of digital evidence for the submission process. Also, when we look at the European perspective, it is already mentioned computational modeling in the new MDR. So this is from the European Commission regulation 2017-745, the medical device regulation that is now taking over the old regulation in this. And here also mentions then explicitly computer modeling as an evaluation assessment tool. Also, when looking at the EMA, the European Medicines Agency, we see that simulation, modeling, and also extrapolation using data is clearly there stated in the regulatory milestones in the pathway to 2025. On the one hand, to also support the development process, but also to reduce and refine the use of animal testing, as this is also a very important aspect of using these kinds of applications in the process. Also here, I want to mention the Avicenna Alliance. This is a global organization that brings together different stakeholders from academia, industry, and other areas, from clinicians, really with the mission to advance forward the use of in silico medicine, and also here majorly address the regulatory barriers in this, and join forces working together and advance forward then new regulations, harmonization globally of these guidance documents, and also other activities in this. And we are also very active in this association by leading also here the European communication with the notified bodies. The second application I want to mention is then the clinical applications. So here, by contrast to having a clinical trial application, this is really then a medical device. And I will also show shortly why. Very often, this is considered a so-called software as a medical device, SaMD. And here it is necessary to have CE and FDA clearance. And also this then implies that quality management system has to be implemented and comply to European, but also the US regulations if you want to enter these different markets. So when we look into a bit more detail about the European Commission regulation, here you can see that software now is really mentioned in this document, either software alone or in combination with physical devices. And as soon as they do any diagnostic or therapeutic decision, this is really then considered a medical device and also has to be treated as this in the whole further progress. And there are two different ways of using this. So on the one hand, software can be used that drives and influences a medical device. So for example, when it's included in a monitoring system, a sensor or whatever, then the software is then in the same class as the medical device, so the same class of the device then. But also software can be independent and can make decisions with diagnosis, therapeutic support. And here, directly it falls into the class of 2A when you do any diagnostic decision or therapeutic decision. There's also then here another way when it has any effect on the personnel, so a higher risk for the patient, and also could lead to that, it can be considered in a higher class in this. So what does this mean in the different classes? So here you can see also a very nice illustration to then also find out what class is the software dedicated to. So for example, when we look at fitness apps for the cardiac health. So when it's really just monitoring, does not make any decision on your health status about that, then it falls into the class 1 and it's self or partial certification required. So it's very easy to also get here the approval on this regulatory, but it is also considered a medical device. But when you then have a more critical software in this, for example, dosage calculator for painkillers, they can really lead then also to the death of a patient if you make any malfunction in this wrong calculation. It then falls into the class 3 in this process. And it means when you're higher than class 2, then you have to go through the whole clinical evaluation. You have to comply with the quality management process, involve notified body in this CE mark, and all these applications that is necessary in this. And this is now the European perspective, but the US perspective is very similar. And all here I want to mention this document. It's dedicated to software as a medical device and the clinical evaluation on this, a guidance document that has been published by the FDA that really then also guides the reader through the different applications and what is necessary to then be considered and get approval of this device. So this was a very, very short introduction on this. If you're interested to hear more, please contact me. I'm also happy to have a longer webinar, as I can also talk way longer on this. And yeah, if you have any questions, then also happy to hear back from you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Simon, for that great presentation and the insights. And also to the entire audience, thank you for staying on a little bit longer. I know we're a little bit over time, but we thought still it's worthwhile. So thank you for being here today. I will end it now because we're also already over time. Have a very happy Easter, great extended weekend, and looking forward to catch up after that in the old normal.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot for a great presentation. Happy Easter.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Happy Easter. Bye.
Bye.